Warning! Kinda Murdery contains adult themes, explicit language, and descriptions of violence. It is not suitable for anyone, and we recommend you stop listening now.
True crime with a dash of the paranormal, the garish, the strange, and the darkly comic. I'm Zevin Odelberg, host of Kinda Murdery, a podcast that's about more than just murder. It's my very own pocket dimension, home to a curated collection of bizarre and compelling stories, the unsolved, the unsettling, and the unbelievable. I cover it all, just so long as it's kinda murdery. Those are facts, folks. Just like it says in the intro, I am Zevin Odelberg, and this is Kinda Murdery. You've found your way to Part 2 of The Devil Lurks Behind the Cross, the murder of Kari Baker. This is the conclusion of the story. And I did say Part 2. So if you haven't heard Part 1 yet, go back and listen to it, and then rejoin us. We'll save you a seat. If you're already all caught up, you'll remember that Kari Baker, consumed by depression over the loss of her child years before, has just apparently taken her own life with an overdose of sleeping pills. But as we'll soon find out, this story is much more intricate and even more tragic than a young mother consumed by grief and probable clinical depression. So if you're ready, please do join me as we uncover what truths we can and solve what mysteries we may. Kinda Murderies, The Devil Lurks Behind the Cross, the murder of Kari Baker, Part 2, conclusion, starts now. The air was thick with doubt and grief, hanging heavy in the homes and hearts of Waco, Texas. The paramedics arrived to find Kari Baker unresponsive, her lips tinged blue, the terrifying hue of mortality. The room told a story. A bottle of Unisom sleeping pills nearly empty, and a note to Matt, her husband, asking him to continue being a loving father to their daughters. Matt had already discovered Kari's lifeless body locked in their bedroom after coming home from renting a movie. It was the second time he had found a loved one, dead. Their daughter Cassidy had died years before. The cause of Kari's death appeared open and shut. Law enforcement seemed to be willing to chalk it up as a tragic suicide. With the typed note covered in Kari's fingerprints and Matt's account that she had been talking about ending her life, it appeared to be a closed case. The authorities even skipped the legally mandated steps, opting not to perform an autopsy. Maybe it was deference to Matt's role as a young pastor, or perhaps they too were caught in the inertia of grief. When Matt returned to his duties at the church, he sermonized about Kari's triumphal entry, and that's in quotes, into heaven. His mother-in-law Linda sat in the pew, her eyes a cascade of tears, her soul yearning for understanding. She wanted to believe that Kari's death was a tragedy devoid of foul play. But skepticism took root with Linda and her sisters, each one harboring a growing distrust of Matt. For years, rumors had circulated about Matt's inappropriate advances towards younger women. The whispers, once dismissed, now demanded investigation. Linda and her sisters formed an informal investigation team dubbed the Charlie's Angels of Waco, and they used their wits and intuition to dig deeper into the mystery of Kari's death. They picked apart inconsistencies. Why would Kari leave 2 pills in the bottle? Why would her suicide note be typed and not handwritten? Their foray into amateur detective work wasn't about revenge. It was about the pursuit of a truth obscured in tragedy and possibly dastardly deceit. While not seasoned detectives, the Charlie's Angels of Waco utilized the insight gleaned from crime shows and their personal experiences. They double-checked Matt's alibis, sifted through his trash, and scrutinized phone records. Linda discovered Matt's frequent calls to Larry Bowles, a name she had not expected. Her mind was ablaze with questions when she heard that a certain young woman named Vanessa Bowles, whose father was Larry, was involved with Matt. With new suspicions in hand, Linda sought the aid of Bill Johnston, a Waco lawyer with a reputation for tackling high-risk cases, a man who had fought against the odds, even his own government, to pursue justice. Johnston, recognizing the gravity and oddity of the situation, enlisted experienced lawmen to dig into the veiled past and murky actions of young Matt Baker. In a case like this, every detail counts. Every action is scrutinized. And in that investigation, everyone involved was not just seeking justice, but also a restoration of faith in people, in institutions, and in the very concept of truth. It's a grim reminder that even in the depths of sorrow and tragedy, vigilance must never waver. Otherwise, truth may slip away, lost in the fog of pain and confusion. If Matt Baker was truly innocent, then the fog would lift, revealing nothing but sorrow. But if he wasn't, the questions that haunted Linda and her sisters would ignite a fire bright enough to pierce through any darkness. The saga surrounding the death of Kari Baker and the subsequent arrest of Matt Baker possesses all the elements of a dark, modern-day morality play. Let's begin with the seemingly incontestable expertise that came into play. Attorney Bill Johnston commissioned the services of 2 seasoned professionals to delve into the mystery surrounding Kari's death. David Stafford, a former head of toxicology, arrived at a startling conclusion. There were no traces of the drugs in Kari's stomach. Obviously, he said, drugs didn't kill her. Johnston then enlisted Tom Bevel, an expert in homicide crime scenes. Bevel scrutinized the photos taken on the night of Kari's death and noticed significant bruising around her lips. In his view, the bruising could have resulted from someone using a pillow to suffocate her. Moreover, the paramedics on the scene observed that Kari displayed signs of lividity, a post-mortem discoloration that called into question Matt's timeline. Yet, despite these findings, conclusive though they seemed at least in indicating that Kari had not taken her own life, or at least not in the manner previously believed, the wheels of justice turned agonizingly slow. Months elapsed without charges against Matt, leaving room for conjecture. Did the Hewitt Police Department doubt the new evidence, or were they simply reluctant to admit their initial investigation had been flawed? It was only after a public uproar and pressure from Matt Cawthon, a seasoned Texas Ranger, that an arrest was finally made. By this time, Matt had taken a ministerial role at a university and was working as a substitute teacher. His community was divided. Some saw him as a wonderful person. Others viewed him with suspicion. A fundraiser and hundreds of messages of support seemed to underscore the community's conflicting sentiments. Matt's own words add yet another layer of complexity. He denied having an affair with Vanessa Bowles, to whom he had grown close after Kari's death. When questioned about reports suggesting he was looking at engagement rings, Matt clarified that the jewelry store visit was to buy earrings for his daughter. He said he had searched for overdose by sleeping pill out of concern for Kari's increasing use of the medication. As for the mysterious disappearance of his computer, Matt claimed ignorance. His legal defense, orchestrated by Guy James Gray, looked robust. According to Gray, the autopsy did not produce any evidence that a pillow was used in suffocation. He attributed the bruise on Kari's mouth to the oxygen mask used by paramedics, a claim that further muddied the waters. Yet as the wheels of justice inched forward, the case elicited a collective introspection among those who knew Matt and Kari. The moral and emotional reckoning was palpable. Friends and family members voiced regret, guilt, and even betrayal. Some, like Kimberly Berry, felt so violated by Matt that they abandoned their faith. Vanessa Bowles herself admits regret over allowing Matt into her life. But perhaps the most chilling and perplexing moment arrives when Matt likens his story to that of Joseph in the Old Testament, a man betrayed by his family and wrongly imprisoned, who returns to aid the very people who sought his downfall. Quote, "And then he came back and helped the family that had tried to destroy him," unquote, Matt said. It's a tale that evokes the extremes of human emotion and moral ambiguity. It's a narrative punctuated by both doubt and conviction, where forensic science, faith, and human psychology collide in an unsettling tableau. What we're left with is not just a whodunit, but a complex web of societal and individual dilemmas that leaves a community torn asunder, each member wrestling with their own moral compass. In a dimly lit room where the air was thick with emotional tension, Matt's eyes welled up. His gaze was a window into a world of personal anguish and soul-searching. "I have said a prayer asking God to forgive the Doolins," he confessed with palpable pain in his voice. "And I have prayed for God to let me forgive them. But I don't blame them. I understand that they're hurting so deep inside that the only way for them to deal with it is to lash out at me." This was no ordinary admission. Matt, seemingly weighed down by the complexities of life and the looming specter of severe legal repercussions, was demonstrating an extraordinary act of empathy. Here was a man, possibly facing a life-altering sentence, extending understanding towards those who might be instrumental in his downfall. In that moment, he shone a light on a deeper truth about human nature. People often project their pain onto others as a form of emotional self-defense. Perhaps the Doolins, plagued by their own unspoken sorrows, were so blinded by their suffering that they could see no other course of action. Or perhaps someone was finally on to monstrous Matt Baker, who wriggled and squirmed with as much piety and kindness as he could project, finally impaled on the cold hook of justice. The truth remains to be seen. As the interview neared its end, a question of profound significance was posed to Matt. What would become of him if the Doolins succeeded in their quest, and he found himself ensnared within the harsh confines of a prison? The room seemed to hold its breath, the atmosphere charged with the weight of the unanswered query. After what seemed an interminable pause, Matt responded. His voice was a mere whisper, but it carried an air of undying conviction. My call will never change. I will always tell people about God. He then stood, his eyes still damp from emotional torrents within. With a steady, deliberate tone, he recited a verse from the book of Proverbs. Trust the Lord with all your heart, he said. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your path straight. With that solemn proclamation, he offered a handshake, as gentle as it was meaningful, and took his leave, exiting through the door as if carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. In the cold walls of a Waco courtroom, as a multitude of journalists from various media outlets furiously scribbled notes, Vanessa Bowles stepped onto the witness stand. Her appearance halted everyone's activities for a moment. There she was, a striking 27-year-old language arts teacher and sports coach from Harker Heights, her blonde hair cascading over a well-fitted gray pantsuit. Matt Baker, the defendant and Vanessa's former lover, looked up, his eyes piercing blue and unblinking, as if caught in the pull of her beauty. But Matt's seemingly serene visage belied the explosive content of Vanessa's testimony. As she spoke, her words meticulously unraveled a tale of manipulation, psychological coercion, and dark plans, all of which she claimed originated with Matt Baker. Vanessa testified that Matt, the charismatic pastor who should have been a moral pillar of the community, had turned her life into a nightmare of secrecy and fear. The two had met back in September 2005 when Vanessa's father joined Crossroads Baptist Church, where Matt was the pastor. A mere 3 months later, Matt had approached Vanessa to offer her counseling for her recent divorce, and soon began making overt advances. Vanessa portrayed herself as a vulnerable figure, freshly divorced and easy prey for the pastor who would become her lover and confidant. According to Vanessa, Matt didn't stop at mere flirtation. In their counseling sessions, he slowly poisoned the well against his own wife, Kari, describing her as a deeply depressed woman who had failed as a wife and mother. While Vanessa claimed that Kari showed no signs of depression whenever they talked, Matt insisted otherwise, sowing seeds of doubt in her mind. As their relationship escalated into a physical affair, Matt's tone shifted from merely disparaging his wife to outright discussing plans to kill her. Details were chillingly specific. He talked of spiking milkshakes and faking suicides. Vanessa testified that Matt had explored obtaining chloroform online and had even attempted to procure date rape drugs in a decrepit corner of Waco. The extent of Matt's deceit and manipulation was staggering. He went on date nights with Kari even while discussing how he despised intimate moments with her, calling her a fat bitch while recounting those experiences to Vanessa. Man, this is tough. Matt continued to live a double life, presenting himself as a caring husband during counseling sessions with Kari, while divulging his dark secrets to Vanessa. It was a narrative filled with twisted irony, almost Shakespearean in its treachery. Vanessa, by her own admission, stayed silent about these ominous confessions for years. Ashamed and afraid, she confided neither in the police nor in her own family about what she knew. It was only now, in a courtroom filled with spectators and media, that she laid bare the layers of lies and manipulation, casting a dark cloud over the charismatic pastor's reputation. Matt listened, pen in hand, jotting down notes. He remained composed, almost stoic, yet the weight of Vanessa's words hung in the air, painting him in an increasingly sinister light. Whether Vanessa's shocking claims would be the decisive factor in the case remained to be seen. But there was no question that her testimony had added an electrifying charge to the proceedings, one that could potentially alter the course of many lives, including her own. By late March, a chilling atmosphere had enveloped Vanessa's life. As Matt confided in her his bone-chilling decision, he would murder his wife Kari on one of their date nights and cunningly stage it as a suicide. Matt, claiming to be worn down by Kari's depression, rationalized his brutal choice. On the fateful morning of April 8th, Vanessa found herself roused awake by her mother at the Bowles residence. The news that Kari had met her demise the previous night hung heavy in the air. Vanessa, still in disbelief, I was shocked, she said, because part of me didn't really think he was going to go through with it. She accompanied her parents to the Bakers' home to express their condolences. As their eyes met, Matt winked at her, a subtle yet horrifying affirmation of his sinister act. Days dragged into a disquieting haze as Vanessa attended Kari's funeral. 5 days later, she found herself alone with Matt. This would be the one and only time he would divulge the grotesque details of Kari's murder, details that would be forever etched in Vanessa's mind. Matt had meticulously planned each step. He emptied sex stimulus capsules that Kari had purchased for improving her libido, and filled them with Ambien stolen from Vanessa's mother's medicine cabinet. After administering alcohol alongside the adulterated capsules, he awaited Kari's impending unconsciousness. Then came the moment he had planned, but one he had hardly prepared for. He planted a farewell kiss on Kari's forehead and uttered, "Give Cassidy a kiss for me." He then pressed the pillow against Kari's face. He held it there until he thought she was gone, but Kari took one last desperate gasp for air. With an expletive, "Oh shit," Matt reinstated the pillow over her face, this time clenching his hand into a fist to ensure her suffocation. The malice was calculated, the act harrowing, and the emotional toll immeasurable. A husband's betrayal and a lover's complicity wove a macabre tapestry that shredded the moral fabric we expect in relationships. Matt's manipulation preyed not only on Kari but also on Vanessa, trapping her in a snare of guilt and fear. Vanessa's ordeal was a haunting reminder of the lengths to which a person can go when masked by deceit and misguided justification. As Matt finished disclosing the haunting details of the night he ended Kari's life to Vanessa, he then claimed that after the gruesome act, he had crafted an elaborate scheme to cover his tracks. He said he typed a counterfeit suicide note on their bedroom computer. Then, in a chilling touch of forethought, he took Kari's lifeless hand and brushed it over the note to leave her fingerprints on it. He positioned the note on the bedside table, surrounded by a bottle of real Ambien and the remains of their alcoholic drinks. He locked the door, exited, and to solidify his alibi, rented a film called When a Man Loves a Woman. He then returned to bust open the bedroom door and waited an agonizing minute before making the 911 call. Matt looked at Vanessa with cold conviction and said to her, this of course from Vanessa's testimony, "You know that you're stuck here with me, right? Because you know about it and you're just as guilty as I am." He proclaimed that God had forgiven him, tapping into his role as a preacher to manipulate the spiritual narrative surrounding his sin. In the subsequent weeks, Matt and Vanessa's relationship deepened and they even began to discuss marriage. But the cracks were already appearing. Vanessa felt her grip on reality slipping, her fears metastasizing. Despite the facade of a preacher, Matt had darkly intimated that Vanessa better remain silent about what she knew. He sent her song lyrics that weren't outright threats, but the implication was unmistakable. Quote, "I'll keep you my dirty little secret. Don't tell anyone or you'll be just a little regret." Unquote. Vanessa's love had curdled into a desperate need for security. "I wasn't attracted to Matt. I just wanted to be safe," she revealed. And then she received a phone call that shifted the landscape of her moral dilemma. Kari's body was going to be exhumed for private investigation. Matt's reaction was chilling. In a, quote, creepy tone, unquote, he warned her not to tell the investigators anything. The cloak and dagger relationship took another twist when Matt decided to relocate, suggesting Vanessa come with him. With that, Vanessa had reached her breaking point. She called him to end things, only to hear his desperate, guilt-laden, but implicitly threatening plea. "I killed my wife for you, and now you're leaving me? You're leaving me?" Matt's chilling confession and Vanessa's unsettling moral quandary throw into sharp relief the dangerous intersections of love, manipulation, and moral decay. Matt used his position of trust as a preacher to bend the moral arc of their universe, while Vanessa grappled with the realization that her silence made her complicit. And even as she tried to untangle herself from this knotted mess, the shadows of Matt's actions loomed large, turning their relationship into a chilling anti-romance of deceit, guilt, and fear. This web of conflicting emotions, and especially fear, held Vanessa in its grip. Despite opportunities to come clean, she found herself trapped in a vortex of silence and complicity. Contacted by a private investigator on behalf of Kari's grieving parents, she held firm in her denial. Quote, "completely denied everything," unquote, were her exact words. When summoned for an interview by the Hewitt Police Department, she maintained her cover, disavowing any knowledge of the affair or the terrible act that ended Kari's life. Soon after, Matt called her, his voice exuding a creepy aura, and left her on the brink of a panic attack. It was a moment that might have pushed many to their ethical limits. But Vanessa, seemingly cornered, told him to turn himself in. Matt's response was an unsettling repetition. God, he said, has forgiven me. For years, even as the curtain slowly began to lift on Matt's heinous crime, Vanessa remained steadfast in her refusal to speak out. As late as January 2009, she was still silent, gripped by the bone-chilling fear that Matt could take her life as easily as he had taken his wife's. Terrified that Matt would, quote, put a bullet in her head, unquote, she told the jury. Vanessa's predicament reflects a societal trap in which the vulnerable often find themselves, ensnared by fear, manipulation, and a distorted moral compass. Her reluctance to expose the truth was fueled not merely by emotional entanglement, but by a genuine dread for her life. It's a haunting manifestation of the insidious power dynamics often at play in such relationships. Here was a woman who, despite being an integral part of this horrifying narrative, was paralyzed by the very real possibility of becoming its next victim. And all the while, Matt leaned into his role as a man of God, weaponizing faith to absolve himself, creating a distorted sanctuary where morality had long since abandoned its post. In a pivotal turn of events, Vanessa finally broke her years-long silence in March 2009. Although initially only admitting to her affair with Matt when questioned by the police, she secured what's known as testimonial immunity for her appearance before the grand jury investigating Kari's death. Curiously, she still refrained from disclosing what she knew about the murder, uncertain if her immunity covered such revelations. It wasn't until her courtroom testimony on a Tuesday that the dam finally broke, washing away years of fear and suppressed information. When Guy James Gray, Matt's defense attorney, attempted to poke holes in her account, Vanessa stood resolute. Confronted by her continued involvement with Matt even after Kari's death, she laid bare the complexities of her situation. Matt had warped her mind, and she was afraid for her life and her daughter's life. I knew what he was capable of. When pressed further by Gray on why she should be believed, Vanessa fired back, "What do I have to gain from this right now? I could lose my job as a teacher." She conveyed her view that Matt had been masquerading as a man of God while committing atrocities, insisting that it was time for him to face justice. And yes, she is correct. Gray then broached the subject of whether she was concerned about Child Protective Services taking her child away. "No," said Vanessa, and then punctuated her testimony with this gut-wrenching statement. "He victimized me. He victimized Kari. He victimized his girls, and he thinks he can do it again. He thinks he can do it again." She disclosed that the fear of Matt was so palpable that she kept a crystal nail file by her side at night, a grim token of the threat she believed he still posed. The courtroom drama highlighted an uncomfortable reality: the struggle for justice in a society where manipulation, fear, and power imbalances can thwart the truth. Vanessa acknowledged her fault in remaining silent for so long. Finally speaking up served as a moment of catharsis. "Everything has now been said," she testified. "I wash my hands clean." Well, I'm not sure that her hands are completely clean, but certainly the guilt she bears is a minnow to a blue whale compared to that of Matt Baker. After Vanessa's testimony, the courtroom's atmosphere was electric, heavy with the weight of impending judgment. Everyone waited for what they presumed would be the dramatic climax, Matt Baker taking the stand. But it never happened. His defense attorney, Guy James Gray, opted against it, a glaring admission that their defense was crumbling. Closing arguments were soon to follow, and the walls seemed to close in around Matt, the former Baptist minister, whose future once seemed so promising. Then, the moment everyone had been waiting for arrived. On January 20th, 2010, the jury came back with a verdict that resounded like a gavel strike, sealing Matt's fate. Guilty. He was sentenced to 65 years to life for the calculated murder of his wife, Kari. Any glimmer of a hope for a reprieve was extinguished in July 2020, when a judge flatly denied Matt's motion for a new trial. The man who once stood at the pulpit now resides behind bars. He remains confined to the Huntsville State Prison in Huntsville, Texas. Until next time, I'm Zevin Odelberg, and this has been Kinda Murdery.